ese hombre holding up the bottle. Look a little closer, cigar and Moscato. An actor in improv coming from Chicago. Auto, make way for Paul Vato.
Mr. Bill Chott, look at you.
Howdy. You know.
Howdy. I don't have
a lot of music playing. Is that supposed to be there, or is that on my phone?
What's that, the wait bot?
Do you hear music playing right now, like guitar music? And a pause? Okay, that's part of your show. Got it.
That was part of our intro. I don't think you have control over what music or muzak you can play, but
that was definitely muzakish.
That was very muzakish. Bill,
that was Muzak Galifianakis.
A little bit, right? How are you, my friend?
I'm doing really good. I got very little sleep last night. Up on a long phone call, and then I met with some. I went to church, and then I met with some friends. My friend Owen Hammer talking about his new comic book, Von Bach, and some other wonderful projects like that. And then headed right over here, and I didn't know I'd be on camera. So pardon me for taking a minute extra longer to get on camera.
No, well, you look amazing. And have you lost weight? Not that that's what makes you look amazing, but
I appreciate that. And yes, I did lose some weight. I'm not getting on the scale to like dissuade myself, because like, what if it's only 2 pounds, but it looks like 50? So I lost a lot of.
No, it's funny you would mention the word 50 or the number 50, because it usually takes about 50 pounds for people to notice even a weight gain, a weight change, a weight loss. Yeah. So don't feel bad if you see people and they don't say anything, and then all of a sudden, when you hit that 50 pounds, all of a sudden they're like, "Have you lost a little bit of weight?" You're like, "Bro, I've lost 50 pounds." So don't let that discourage you. But
not at all.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So let me just do a quick introduction. I want to welcome everyone to Paul Vato Presents. And today my guest is Bill Chott. And Bill Chott is an award-winning improv teacher, but he's also an incredible actor, comedian, satirist, improviser, sketch artist, all of the above, star of stage and screen. So Bill, I really want to thank you for spending your Greek Easter with us.
Thank you.
Sure. Even though we don't celebrate, we're done with ours.
Yeah, I know. I'm no longer. I was part of my youth. I was raised Orthodox Catholic. I'm not technically Orthodox Catholic any longer, but I do. There was a lot of the Orthodox traditions that really hit home to me, and so there's still part of my Easter, even though I celebrate back on the regular calendar, if at all.
The normal. That's right.
Yeah.
No, I not that I would know that, but why was there an Orthodox background? Where were your parents from, or your father, or your mother?
It's a long story. My father wanted to be a priest. He was trained to be a Roman Catholic priest. He went to the seminary and was all ready to become a priest, and then he met my mother. And the Orthodox Church has a married priesthood. So we had been popping around to, we had been Episcopalian, Lutheran, whatever. And then he remembered the nuns mentioning something about the Orthodox Church and how they had a married priesthood. And he was like, hey. So then we moved to South Canaan, Pennsylvania, in northeastern Pennsylvania, where he completed his seminary training to become an Orthodox priest. And we were that for a while.
That's an amazing story. I don't think I knew that. So was your father in the priesthood his whole life, or what?
No, well, for most of his youth, he was being groomed, pardon the expression, to be a priest.
I see where this is going.
Yeah, and then, he learned Greek, Hebrew, Latin, philosophy, literature. He did it all. And, right before he took his final vows, that was it. And so then, in the Orthodox Church, there were other classes that he had to take, and now he had to learn some Slavonic and some other things, which kind of, unfortunately, Orthodoxy, at least in America, is so segmented into Russian, Greek, Romanian, etc., that it's difficult for them to grow here because, it's important to preserve customs from, where people are from. But if you're trying to reach out and get new people involved who don't speak that language, they're never going to enter that church unless there's a significant amount of English in it for them to be able to absorb it and understand what's being said, etc. And certainly there's a place for having, one liturgy in one language and another in English, or the language of whatever country they're from. But like in Russia for many years under communism, they were forbidden from doing it in the language of the country, in Russian. So they had to do it in Slavonic, which is kind of like a dead Slavic language, kind of like the Latin of Eastern Europe. The Russian government didn't want the people to understand what they were really talking about in church, because it might empower the people for one reason or another, or disempower them one way or the other. And in America, there's this unique problem of people wanting to preserve the culture that they came from, without making an effort towards, for lack of a better word, evangelism. Not that Orthodoxy or any form of Catholicism is considered evangelical, that I'm aware of. But you do want to make an effort to grow your congregation instead of like hope that the grandkids stay in the religion that their grandparents were raised in.
Right. You know what? That makes perfect sense, because you're right. You're always like, oh, there's the Russian Orthodox, there's the Greek Orthodox, there's and I knew I have Greek friends. So for me, I always called it Greek Easter. And then, as you grow up, and maybe as your worldview expands, you're like, wait a minute.
Even the Greeks call it Greek Easter.
It's not good. So now I'm like Orthodox Easter, because not everyone is Greek.
And the Russians are like, but yes, it is Greek Easter.
Меня зовут Pavel. Как дела? Wonderful. Well, Bill, it is such a pleasure to catch up with you and to see you here. And we can chat about whatever you'd like. And if you have time, we can even bring some people up and maybe they can ask you some questions, because you've had such an amazing – this is something about you that I didn't know. And you reminded me a little bit of John Lutz, who I believe grew up with a preacher for a father. I just remember that was one of the things about our mutual friend, John Lutz, who went on to write on Saturday Night Live, I believe, or 30 Rock, I should say. Yeah. A lot of great shows. So it's amazing to see the success that has come out of Chicago. Company excluded, but myself, I mean, just the people that have come out. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that? Is it the work ethic? Is it just that we're naturally funny? Why have there been so many successful people, especially in comedy, sketch comedy, improv comedy, and any of the shows that are based around that?
I want to say there's two reasons, one of which is immersion. When you're in the Chicago scene, you don't just like go off and do your thing. Well, there are some people that would, they would have their 9-to-5 job or whatever, be an improviser on Saturday and then forget about it all week. But most people who go there to study are going to wind up doing it 6-7 days a week, several shows or classes a day. They're going to be doing, Second City, IO, Annoyance, every other theater that has grown up there since, Comedy Sports, which is one of the earlier ones too. And so there's so many different opportunities to completely immerse yourself in improvisation in Chicago. But I think also the camaraderie, we stick in touch with people that we learned with, like I'm going to be in Portugal this summer with one of my best friends, and we've known each other since we went through the Second City Training Center together, friend of yours as well, Yvonne Landry. And she is bringing me to a European intensive. She started her own thing called the Superhero Training Center. You can find out more about that at superherotrainingcenter.com. But she is holding a European intensive for acting, stage combat, improv, character work, clown. I'm going to be studying clown for a week and then teaching character improv for a week. And that's because Yvonne and I came up through the Second City system. And, you reach out and you work with friends of yours. And, I think almost everybody that we know, maybe if they didn't reach out to us, they at least reached out to other Chicago. Like Lutz is another great example of that, you know? He was friends with Tina back in Chicago. They were even on the same Herald team, I believe. And so she reached back and, you know, pulled him in the production and made him a part of it. 30 Rock, and, you know, so many of our friends have done that. She got her job at Saturday Night Live because she's brilliant, but also because Adam McKay, who's now a brilliant filmmaker, reached down and said, hey, you know what? This woman deserves her due. She deserves her shot. You know, so we all learn to hone our talent there, but we also make the connections that people are aware of our wheelhouse. They're aware of our abilities.
That is so true. And again, I think Tina Fey is a perfect example. You can absolutely not take anything away from her. But, you know, knowing someone from Chicago like Adam McKay, and he's like, hey, this person needs to be out here. I mean, I remember when I first arrived on the scene and I came in from the suburbs. So I kind of fell in between that, you know, hey, I only do this on the weekends because I've got this business to run. But I was lucky enough to be, you know, to have my own business I owned a gourmet ice cream and coffee shop, Oberweis Dairy of Geneva. Yeah. So I could actually drive into the city. So I could do somewhere in between where I wasn't doing it every day, but maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And then especially once we started South Station and did Touched by an Anglo, you know, I was able to dedicate the weekend to that, but then still pick up a class here and there during the week. But I remember when it was kind of, you know, like when Horatio was first going out there, but I'm sure that, you know, Tim Meadows was already out there and Chris Farley had already been out there. And I'm sure they were like, hey, there's this guy, Adam McKay, you should know. So it kind of all just trickles that way. And obviously you have to have the chops and the talent, but it's nice to have that connection. Even when we moved to LA, I guess you were there, and Jim Zulovic was our first call. We're like, well, what do we do? It's 2000. We just moved here. We don't know anyone. And he was like, oh, well, there's this bar we can go smoke at. That's where I go. You can still smoke there. And we're like, okay, sorry for my impression, but that
was a pretty good Zulovic impression. I knew exactly what you were doing, so that means it's a good impression.
I hate it here. It's always sunny. You know.
He did enjoy the Chicago weather above all. He was one of those people who was such a Chicagoan to his core. You know, we lost him way too soon. But, you know, some people, they just, you know, they're at their best when they're in Chicago. And they still thrive and do wonderful things out here in LA. And God knows he worked on a lot of projects when he was out here. But he also, you know, he loved being a Chicagoan and being in Chicago. And, you know, so many of our friends do and spend so much time back there. I wish I could go back there and visit more often. I feel like I don't have as many roots there anymore because so many generations have gone by of improvisers, performers, or whatever.
No one's going to know us, Bill. We're going to show up at Corcoran's or Last Act. I don't even remember what it's called now, or Old Town Ale House. My headshot is long gone from behind the bar. My headshot used to hang it was my first black and white headshot taken in the 1900s, back in like 96 or 90, 97, 98. And it hung right on the corner at the far end of the bar at the Old Town Ale House. And I was walking in Los Feliz, I think it was. I was walking from one bar to the next. So I don't even know if it was Los Feliz, but I was going from one bar to the next. And I'm going across the street, and this young lady walks by me. She goes, Paul Vato. I go, hey, I'm like, who? Okay, first I'm like, who is this? Do I owe her an apology? And I was like, hey, how's it going? And she goes, you don't know me. And I go, oh, okay. I go, who are you? She goes, I stare at your photo all the time at the Old Town Ale House in Chicago. She goes, I sit at the end of that bar. And I was like, oh my God. And I was just like so grateful and thankful that she at least said that. But my first instinct is like, oh God, what did I do to this poor girl? Right. But she read right through it. She goes, you don't know me. I was like, oh, okay, what happened? How do you know? So yeah, no one's going to know us when we go back. But Bill, it would be so wonderful. And if you ever do, let me know, because I would love to join you on that trip, because I think you can bring back some memories. I mean, so much time was spent there at those bars, you know, and around the Improv Olympic area and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I can still picture Jim in his slightly oversized Chicago cop jacket, you know. Yep. Yeah. And then years later, because of the cigar business, I met a guy named Mark Thomas, who's the guy that started the Alley.
Oh, wow.
Piper's The Alley, right? Where they sold Doc Martens and all that gear.
That was the Alley. Yeah. That's where I bought my first pair of Docs, I believe.
Well, he was the guy that first brought him into Chicago, and he did all the. He was a jeweler. He made silver jewelry, a silversmith, and so he owned like a Blue Taboo or whatever, the sex shop, and the Alley shop. He owned all that. That was and Blue Havana, which was his cigar shop, and that's how I met him, through the cigar business. But I randomly met him at a convention, and then we just became friends. But he's the guy that brought in those cop jackets, the Doc Martens, back in the 70s or whatever. So a lot of history there, Bill. You're originally from St. Louis, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong.
You're absolutely right. I was born in St. Louis, and then I was raised all over the country, because not only were we chasing Dad's dream of being a priest eventually someday, but he was a freelance writer. He wrote industrials for companies like, International Harvester and Shell, and a lot of he wrote for McDonnell Douglas during the space program. So we would move based on his job. So it was like being an Army brat, only your dad was the opposite of a drill sergeant. He was a comedy writer, working in the corporate world.
Did he teach you things, or did you learn this comedy? Because you have such a brilliant comedy mind, Bill, that and I don't know, does it come from somewhere? I know that obviously the training helps, but there must be some kind of, something
part
from
of
your
it
father.
Part of it comes from both of my grandfathers, who were performers later in life. They were both also, union family men. One of them was a welder and the other was a machinist. But they always performed, if there was a community production or a church production or whatever they had the opportunity to do. And then my mother's father, George Muse, we don't have the same last name, but that was her maiden name. He was, hold on, I'll show you a picture of him. Oh no, it's glued to the wall. I thought it was like tacked up there or something. Anyway, he was one of few SAG actors that were headquartered in St. Louis. So anytime there was a big thing like a McDonald's commercial that needed Watson from Holmes and Watson, he had this mustache. It was perfect for that. He would play Santa Claus and later grew out a full beard so that he could be Santa Claus year round, and made a lot of money. And used to work with Mickey Carroll, who was one of the Munchkins in the original Wizard of Oz. And since he was a little person, he would often get cast as an elf. And my grandfather, who looked like Santa Claus, always got cast as Santa Claus. So they were two of the few SAG actors that were in St. Louis, and they were always working together,
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Now, and did I read this somewhere? Am I making this up? So did your dad also put you in a commercial? Were you in any of his commercials? Or
no.
Okay.
No, he didn't write commercials per se. He wrote more industrials.
Oh,
They did take the theme song that he wrote for Standard and Amoco, Ring a Bell, Ding Ding, that were in commercials all over the 70s. Every time you saw a commercial for Standard or Amoco. And he wrote that originally for an industrial, and then it was so popular that they used it in their commercials.
That's amazing. I remember it. I mean, because I remember that distinct ding ding,
Yeah. Like you used to roll over that little hose when you pulled into the gas stations, and it'd make the ding ding.
Yeah, and then somebody had to run out and pump your gas and clean your windshield and check under the hood. I mean, they had to know you were there. What a life, how things have changed. I know that there's still some places on the East Coast where you're not allowed to pump your own gas, but if anyone's listening that's younger, they're like, well, wait, what do they care who shows up? Well, somebody had to pump your gas and clean your windshield and do all that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So then, and we have another connection, and I know that we've brought this up before, but I had a cigar customer, a really good cigar customer who loves cigars and loves Vato cigars, and attends the Big Smoke every year, and he has for the past 20 years. He may have missed one. If he has, I don't think he has. But you worked with him at a bank that he owned, apparently.
Yeah, St. John's Bank. In Overland, Missouri, which is where I went to high school, where my father grew up, where his mother grew up. That community there, St. John's Bank had been around, all my life and way before that. And so when my sister graduated, she was looking for work, and she found a job working as an administrative assistant at St. John's Bank, and immediately moved up the ladder. And, at the time, Fletcher was vice president at St. John's Bank, and so she was secretary to the vice president. And so that didn't hurt when I graduated from high school and was looking for work instead of going back to work at the Steak and Shake where I was working at. People aren't familiar with the Midwest. Steak and Shake is, that burger chain that makes amazing shakes and chili. So anyway, that was my job before that. And then, once my sister was able to put in a good word, I met with Fletcher's brother, because his family was very much a part of that bank and founding of that bank. His brother Mark was the head of HR. So he brought me in the office and already knew that he liked me and thought I was funny and whatever. So they both supported me. And, I worked my way through college, basically working at St. John's Bank, not like, I wasn't like directly under Fletcher. So I would see him and be like, I shouldn't bug him because he's the vice president of the bank, but he's also cool with my sister. So what do I do? And I think, working at the bank really prepared me for listening a lot. You have to listen as an improviser. And I really took a lot of time to listen to people and slow down, because when you're a bank teller, especially in the mid to late 90s, your customers tend to be a lot older, because younger people use the ATMs and other things. The people who are actually in the bank are going to be older people, sometimes who are confused by some of the new processes and need to talk it over, or they're lonely. And, you become a surrogate grandchild for them or whatever. And I guess I have that sort of grandchild face, and a lot of them would spend a little extra time. So I'd spend a little extra time listening. And, I loved my experience there. And then Fletcher, years later, when I opened for the Smothers Brothers at the Family Arena in St. Charles, Fletcher got seats on the floor at the arena to see me perform. And I'm probably mostly for the Smothers Brothers, but it was good to know that he was out there, as well as my family and, people from all over my life. But he was definitely one of the people that I was proud to have in that audience.
Of course. And he is he's very proud of you. And it was just one of those things where, as you start to know your customers and they become more like clients than customers, and Fletcher and I would chat. And then, of course, my history of comedy came up in Chicago, and he probably mentioned, oh, I had an employee of mine that went off and now is kind of famous. His name is Bill Chott. And I'm like, of course I know Bill Chott. Yes, of course. Or that's probably the only way it would have happened, because I didn't know that you worked at a bank. And then he told me his history of owning this bank, or his family starting this bank, and you being one of his star employees and or coworkers, as I like to say. And so it was
star employee necessarily.
Amazing. So then did you kind of quit cold turkey and move to Chicago, or did you ever commute, or did you just decide? And how did you know to go to Chicago? Because the internet was maybe just starting, or?
Yeah, the internet was not a thing before then, no. It was because of my dad, because he would do, when he worked with Hormel, International Harvester, companies that worked out of Chicago, he was already familiar with Second City from SCTV. And, he knew that they did, Saturday Night Live. And, he was probably familiar of the history of the Compass, because the Compass, that later became Second City, started off in St. Louis.
That's right.
When my dad was in college. And I kept on asking him, did you ever go to the Crystal Palace at Gaslight Square to see, Mike Nichols and Elaine May, or any of those, Severn Darden, Del Close? That's where Del Close started improvising. And my dad was like, no, we didn't really know about any of all that. I was like, okay. They went to the Muni Opera and saw musical comedy in an outdoor setting. But so my dad was very, very much aware of Second City, and made me and my brother and my sister very much aware of it, before anybody else knew Second City, from, when it became a big hit, or SCTV, when it became a big hit on NBC. We had been watching it on PBS, which was rebroadcasts of their CBC program. And it was, we would be walking around talking like Bob and Doug McKenzie, going, "Coo, coo, 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 coo," before anybody knew what that was. And we were going through the roof when their album came out, and they had 2 hit songs, the 12 Beers of Christmas and Take Off with Geddy Lee. My sister was already a huge Rush fan anyway. So, so we were steeped in Second City. And so what I did was what anybody used to do in that day was I went to a bookstore that had a book stand, a magazine stand, a newsstand. That was the term we used to use back in the day. They had a newsstand that would have, the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, and all the other papers. So I got a Sunday paper, Chicago Tribune, and circled all the ones that said bank teller, because that was the thing I had the most professional experience with at the time. I had a degree in communications, so I could have probably looked for a communications job, but I took the easy route because I knew I was going to leave whatever job it was eventually, hopefully, and worked out that way, to become an actor. So I wasn't really like, what's the best use of my degree? That didn't matter to me. So I got a job at Boulevard Bank, which was the basement of the Wrigley Building, or the ground floor of the Wrigley Building, but the vault was in the basement. So one of my last official jobs was working in the vault underneath the Wrigley Building, which if you stepped outside of the vault, through 2 secured doors, you'd walk through a hallway out into a garage, and then there was the Billy Goat Tavern. So a lot of mornings I would go to the Billy Goat Tavern and have breakfast after checking in and doing my morning deposits, waiting for the afternoon deposits to come in, or me and Jerry, the other guy that worked down there in the vault with me. It was just 2 tellers down in the vault all day counting money, and we could take it at our own pace. And if you got through everything early, then you just sit around the office and, shoot the shit for a couple hours, which is what we did.
I mean, but you had like a counting machine? You had...
you put it in there, you go, brrr. But then there were some things that you would have to... That was... Counting machines back then weren't, putting it through the machine for a strand and making sure that they weren't counterfeit or anything like that. So you really had to keep an eye on it. A lot of them you could tell by touch whether it was a counterfeit. Didn't come into many counterfeits, but I came across maybe 5 or 6 in my career as a teller.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's not a lot.
No, it's not that many. Not as many people do it because the thing was, at least by that point, you had the marker that you could do the marker on the bill, and it would either leave a mark or not, and that's how you knew whether it was a counterfeit. But nobody tends to really counterfeit 5s and 10s.
No,
20s at that point were a little bit updated, so they wouldn't even really do it with a 20 either. So you just had to look out for the hundreds and be like, this doesn't look good. Or, people would try to pass things where they would cut the corners off of a $10 bill and then paste a 20 onto it. And I'm like,
okay.
Maybe it was somebody's leftover magic trick, but didn't you just burn a $10 bill then? It's no longer usable as the 10, so then you're out 10 anyway. I don't know.
Well, I'd heard a story where if you were to send in like the 4 corners of a bill, they'd send you a new bill. But I don't think that was true.
That might have been the case.
Well, then why don't people just take one corner from different bills and make new bills? So I don't think that could be true.
Yeah.
Did you ever run into, I don't know, who were the famous icons of the Billy Goat Tavern, but like Mike Royko, or did you ever see any of these people?
No, I never saw, or if I did, I didn't know that it was them. But I don't believe I ever saw any of the Chicago Denzians who were regulars at the Billy Goat.
Of course. And so around what year was this, Bill, if you don't mind revealing?
I moved to Chicago in 92. So summer of 92. And that was my job. And then I lived in Wicker Park in this place that was originally created to be like a senior living center or assisted living center, and they couldn't fill it. So they started filling it with young artists and stuff like that who couldn't afford housing, and this made it affordable. But you had to share a bathroom with the person next door to you, like you were some like Wild West boarding house or something.
Wow. And you had your own room type of a thing, or?
Yeah, my own studio. Yeah, my whole apartment was about as big as my bedroom is right now.
Sure.
It mostly my bed. And then TV was up on a counter. The small refrigerator and stove and everything were kind of like built into the wall. and then you had your shared bathroom situation.
So did you end up at Improv Olympic first or at Second City because you knew of Second City, or how did
I
that?
wound up at Second City. I really didn't even know about Improv Olympic. I had heard about it in the ether just a little bit from my friend Ray Brewer and from Tom Johnson, who later went on to work on The Daily Show. They were talking about Improv Olympic. Yeah, and I was like, I don't have time for that. I'm there for Second City. and then before I even started going to Second City, I was looking through the Chicago Reader, and I would keep on seeing about Improv Olympic. And the first show I saw there was not a good show. But back then, they would have a ticket raffle every night. When you bought your ticket, it would go into, a little bowl or whatever, and they'd pull it out. And then they would take, that person would get 15 free tickets or whatever. Because, from a business standpoint, you're going to make more money off the people who come in if you get a cut of the liquor and they bring in, 10, 15 friends and they get in free, but they drink, $200 worth of beer, you're doing good. Mm-hmm. So I was lucky enough to have gotten those tickets because I didn't want to come back. I saw it with my brother and he was like, "You're better than everybody on that stage." And I said, "Well, thank you, but I don't know how to do some of the stuff they were doing." And he was like, "You will." And then and I came back and I saw The Family. So my real exposure to IO at first was The Family. With that time, it would have been Adam McKay, whom we talked about earlier, Ian Roberts, Matt Besser, Ali Faranakian, and Miles, of course, yeah. Miles Stroth. So yeah, that was like the core, group of The Family. And I was like, wow, these guys are amazing. I want to learn how to do that. However, all my money from the bank was being spent on rent, food, and Second City. And at one point I took a class from Sharna, and I was there 1 week and I came back the next week and I wasn't able to return. The money wasn't there. I also I didn't feel it was clicking for some reason or not. Personalities, maybe, I don't know. But so I didn't return. And then of course Sharna called me up. "What do you mean? Why are you not coming back? Why didn't you even talk to me? Talk to me. You could be an intern. Why don't you talk to me?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm already interning at Second City, so I'm really kind of busy." And so she was like, "All right, whatever." And then so friends of mine started getting on Herald teams. And by the time that and then I did comedy sports because they paid, and it wasn't something that I had to pay into. I was already paying for an education in improv at Second City. And so I got my stage time and my experience really working in front of a crowd and putting suggestions immediately into action and, working for that something wonderful right away with comedy sports. And so I had a pretty damn good skill set, was hired up to the Second City right after I graduated from the training center, the conservatory. And as soon as that happened, people started asking me to play in the Armando show, or not the Armando show. Yeah, that was the Armando Diaz Hootenanny and Theatrical Experiment when we first mounted it.
Armando Diaz Theatrical Experience and Hootenanny.
There you go. I was in the second show. I was absent for the first show. I think I was touring or something, but I was asked to workshop with the cast. And so I was in the second show, which means I wasn't in that iconic photo that everybody has of it. I missed out on all the iconic memorabilia. Like I was hired up out of Second City for the Dana Carvey show before I could get my name on that wall, that list of people who had put up a review at Second City. So there's a lot of milestones. I wish I could go back in time in history and flesh out in some way. It seems silly. It's a silly little thing, and it's rooted in Chicago. And
it's me too. I mean, I think we all wish we could go back and do some do-overs. Like in 93, I had to make a decision, and it was go to Chicago and learn how to do stand-up because I didn't know the difference between stand-up and improv. Or I had the opportunity to buy this gourmet ice cream and coffee shop, Oberweis Dairy. And if anyone from the Chicagoland area knows about Oberweis, it's an amazing product. And I added coffee to it, and that's how I met my first mentor, Nicholas Papa Nicholas, slightly Greek man, and he's the one that
Slightly
taught me
Greek.
all about. Yeah,
What a slightly Greek mean?
Slightly Greek, Nicholas, Papa Nicholas, and so I'm glad everything worked out the way it did. But it's funny to think that had I gone there in '92 or '93, like maybe we would have met way earlier. And I'm just like, oh, what a missed opportunity, because Second City was right here in my backyard, and I didn't find it till like '97. And I went to I didn't go into Second City first because I'd actually drove into the city in like 92 or 93, and I met with Joyce Sloan because I was doing just a small little radio show at a station in the Chicago suburbs in Aurora, where I grew up. And I would bring in local stand-up comedians that were, so I had like Rich Hall on, like bigger name comedians, and some I've forgotten already, but that were performing that weekend. And I think my show must have been on a Wednesday, probably on Thursday, because they were already in town. And then they were going to perform Friday and Saturday and Sunday, 2 shows each day. So on Thursday, they'd come and do local radio. And I was one of, so I remember driving in to talk to, and Joyce took a meeting. And I was like, I wanted her to maybe sponsor the show or send me comedians. And she was like, well, we don't do stand-up. Like, that's nothing that we do. We had a great conversation, whatnot. But, and of course, she tried to pitch me on Second City. And I was like, you know what? I will. But I didn't have, then I bought this shop. So it took me another 5 years to really get into the city, 97 maybe, when I finally started, and I discovered Improv Olympic. And I was there. My impression of Sharna is not as good as yours, but it was, everyone introduced themselves. And I was like, I'm Paul Vato. I want to learn how to do stand-up comedy. And she's like, well, we don't do that here. And I'd already paid with a check, because we used to write checks. And I was like, well, I've already paid, so I guess teach me what you guys teach. And if I like it, I'll stick around. And she was like, whatever, okay. Here's my dog, and Chris Farley, and Tim Meadows, and she would name drop Mike Myers. Yeah. And I was like, okay. So that Monday, I went to go see an Armando show, and luckily that was my first show that I saw. I mean, I already signed up; I was committed, but it was, and I still remember it was Abby Shackner was the monologist. And she talked about her father being a dentist from Ohio. And then what you guys did, and I don't remember if you were there, forgive me, and I'm sure it was like Brian Stats.
I don't remember either. But my guess is I wasn't there because every show that I did in those early days, Armando himself was always the monologist.
Right. So this was already as it evolved, and it was Abby. And maybe we should explain a little bit what the Armando show is. Or what it's become, but I think it was probably Stack and Kevin Dorff and Kevin Mullaney and Peter Gwynn and Sue Messing and that group. And I was just like, probably John Lutz. I was like blown away I was like, how do they do this? So I knew that there was a trick. I didn't know what it was, but I'm like, okay, I got to learn. Just like you said, I want to do that. So that's what got me involved with the Improv Olympic, and then eventually Second City. And I remember I'd see I would see Joyce Sloan and maybe say hi to her every now and then, but I don't remember ever talking to her and telling her, hey, remember me? We met 5 years ago and I was pitching you to be a sponsor. And she was like, we don't need to advertise. I think that was the thing. I wanted her to buy advertising on my show. She was like, why? You don't have to. And I was like, oh, okay.
Everybody comes out to see these shows.
That was it. That's what she said.
I'll never forget. I didn't have a lot of conversations with Joyce because I was very intimidated, even though she's sweet as hell. She's everybody's, grandma, basically. And one of the first interactions I had with her was I had been touring, so I did not see when they mounted Old Wine in New Bottles, which was the 35th anniversary review. And they went back and they workshopped a lot of original Second City scenes with new actors, and then would have workshops and guest performers like Avery Schreiber. And so I went in and was able to see it finally after coming back from tour. And when you get back in town, your first priority is not, after touring Second City material for 2 months, is not, go boy, I'm going to go hang out at Second City and see more shows. You'd spend a couple days at home, And so the show had been up for quite a while. And I was an understudy for it because I was in the touring company. And I was laughing my ass off. I really enjoyed it. I enjoy the throwback material even more so than the more recent material. So I was really enjoying it, laughing, and I saw Joyce noticing me at one point laughing, and she nodded her head. And then in intermission, she goes, "The way you were laughing in there, it seems like you'd never seen this show that you're supposed to be understudying." And I was like, this is my first time. That's why. And then and there was no reason for me to be intimidated. She was just curious, like, what, hadn't seen this before? And then when I was up for the Dana Carvey show, she said at one point, she goes, "You make sure and let me know when you get that. Not if you get that, when you get that." And I was like, "Thank you." And then as soon as I got it, she was the first call I made, because she was the first person that said, "I want to know," no slight to anybody else, no slight to my touring company, no slight to Kelly Leonard, who was producing at the time, or Beth Kligerman, or anybody. But Joyce wanted to know. So I was like, yes, I'll tell Joyce. And the way she reacted, it was so genuine. She goes, "Oh, that's the best news in the world." And mind you, she had heard from so many alumni of Second City. Like, I just got, Saturday Night Live, which was a much bigger deal than the Dana Carvey show, or I got a 5-picture deal or whatever, talking with Bill Murray or Dan Aykroyd, or, any of the other amazing performers from those early days. But she acted as if it was genuinely the first time she had ever heard such amazing news. And it was because it was another new generation, another new improviser that, she helped foster by what she helped create.
Wow, great story. What touring company were you with, Bill? Or
I was in Blue Coat.
You were in Blue Coat.
Which means when I was hired up, my company was Ali Farinakian, Rachel Dratch, Rachel Hamilton, Francis Callier, and Kevin Dorff. That was so I was the ultimate freshman. I was quaking in my boots because most of them I had only seen on the stage, and I was in awe of Kevin Dorff and wound up being his roommate for a year. And, I had, Francis had been there longer than anybody, both performing and teaching. And Ali I had seen with the family that night. Rachel Hamilton was kind of like a senior, and I was a freshman in comedy sports. So, she was already moving up into Second City as I was just coming into comedy sports. So everybody was this and then Rachel Dratch, I had the world's biggest crush on. Everybody that was in that company I was in awe of. So it was the best experience. And then later, Tina Fey and Amy Poehler moved up into that company when Rachel moved up to main stage, and when Francis moved up to ETC, I believe. That created 2 new openings. So they brought in Tina and Amy, and
so they were technically behind Rachel, they were, I don't know if that's the right word or not, but they were then the freshmen, and you guys had moved up.
Yeah.
Wow, amazing. And
I knew that when Tina and Amy had done this thing that was very different from anything that I had seen in any review, and probably harkens back closer to the early roots of Second City. It was a poetic monologue called "I Want to Be an Action Hero." And they were reciting it at the same time, and they trade off lines and trade off words, and it was spoken word, and it was so wonderful. I was like, I've never seen anything like that here at this theater. They're going to revolutionize the place. And they went on and did that.
Amazing.
In so many different ways.
So did you not, you didn't get to do a review then at Second City? Then you got
not a main stage review. I understudied for a month in Adam McKay's role in Pinata Full of Bees, which was talk about, a show that really, really kind of like shook things up at Second City, because it was very Brechtian in that people would change costumes and things on stage. It was very much like a Herald, because all the scenes got called back and intertwined by the end. It was I think a lot more radically political than most of the reviews I had seen there, because I had seen reviews like, Iraq, you break. We just made an Iraq reference. And this one was, it was starting with like this post-apocalyptic gas mask vision that satirized the America's always going to win mentality, and ended with people literally cutting up their Blockbuster cards, which at that time was unthinkable. That was the only way to access all this entertainment that was out there. And people were like, yeah, screw this company for what they're doing. And Adam McKay would be cutting them up, no, he was doing the monologue as I think John Glazer in a donkey mask was cutting up the cards on stage. And I got to do that for a month. I got to step in, another one of my comedy heroes, since I saw those guys perform with the family the first time, got to perform in his shoes for about a month. And then I didn't get moved up permanently because Kevin Dorff was senior to me, but he was in Edinburgh, Scotland. And by that point he was with Green Co., not Blue Co. So they picked up Green Co. and took them to Edinburgh, and he was performing there. And so they couldn't move him up right away. And so I got to do it for about a month, which was awesome. It was great to have equity pay for a month because I'd quit my bank job thinking, now I'm a professional actor and I'm going to tour the country and bow, 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 and I'll be on SNL by next week. And no, I eventually made my voice made it onto SNL, but it didn't happen right away, certainly.
Interesting. And, was there a hierarchy to Green Co., Blue Co.? What was the other one? Red Co. or
Red Co.? No, I don't think there was a hierarchy. I think at one point Green Co. was the one that they would go to for industrials more often. And then that stopped being the case because Second City Communications kind of like blew up really big there in the 90s. Because we were all living through the backlash to the stand-up boom,
Right. Yeah, of course.
Improv had its day, and that was part of that. So, I
always thought that. I mean, they had Gay Co., and I was like, well, why don't you put the rest of us minorities into Brown Co.? Do Brown Co.
Ali would always say that,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he was like, why isn't there a Brown Co.?
Yeah,
yeah, made sense, and he would call it Second City Spice. Well,
I think that's why I started. Tilda Del Toro and I put together the Latino improv and sketch comedy group Salsation. And it's still going.
And so needed.
Yeah, so needed. Yeah. And I've always maintained it wasn't that anyone was being exclusionary. It was just that there's so many Latinos, but none of us were stepping up and going to study improv or at Second City or anything. So it wasn't
there were probably microaggressions keeping them out of it,
Sure. Yeah. I remember Ricky Carmona saying something like that where, he was Cuban. So he's black and Latino. Yeah. And he goes, you step on stage, they're like, like stick him up or whatever. And he's like, okay, I guess I'm that guy, that's, I'm saying. So you're right. You're right. That could have been that may have been the issue, but I'm glad we found our home with Salsation, which then became Barrio Speedwagon.
Yeah. So, that's such a great name, Barrio Speedwagon.
I love great names like, who was there? Stir Friday Night.
Yes.
Weeby Heroes. The OUI, Weeby. Man, Nation of Improv, I think, is also another. Yes. And they'd wear the bow ties and everything. The Nation of Improv. It's fantastic. I love a good. I know that sometimes they say punnery is the lowest form of comedy, but I love it.
I disagree. I love my puns personally. I think
I love it. So what year, if you don't mind, was this? So it would have been like 95, 96, the Pinata Full of Bees, or is that even earlier?
Pinata Full of Bees would have been, I think, 95. 95, because Dana Carvey show was 96, and then I moved out to LA in 97.
Wait, so then did we not hang out in Chicago? I think I made that up because I may have.
No, we did hang out, and here's what happened. I would come in frequently because I would, reconnect with everybody that I knew from then. And so we were all part of the same crowd. So we would wind up hanging out at Last Act and, in the lobby at Second City and all those places. And I definitely got to know you more when you moved out to LA. But there was definitely a period in time where, I came back and I was like, oh, who are these new people? I met you and a bunch of other people who hadn't been like, in the system at the same time I was, but we're always this continuous family, at least hopefully, that's been there from the history, and new people coming, and other people who've been doing it for a while moving on to other things. And but yeah, we definitely hung in Chicago.
And now that you mentioned that, I do remember that, because it was the same thing. Even in 2000, when I finally made the move to LA, when I was probably back 5-6 times a year, because you miss Chicago. You love Chicago so much. And you're right. You're like, oh, who are these new people? And you meet them and you try to encourage them to move to LA because that's where they're going to need to be, or New York. So it's all getting much clearer now, where, and I remember even performing with you at some festival or something where I threw out a horrible first line. And I was like, why would I do that? I know nothing about Shakespeare, but you ran with it. And I was like, this is why they're brilliant. They're such brilliant improvisers. And I was like, to be or not to be? And then somehow the scene was great, but thanks to you, because I was like, I know nothing about Shakespeare. Why? You're such a dummy. Why would you say that? But you made it work. Of course you did. So how did the Dana Carvey show reach out? How did they find Bill Chott in Chicago? Was it like Second City or Saturday Night Live, where they come and watch you perform? Or
no, it was very different. It was unique, and everybody has a different path to both Saturday Night Live and to different shows that they do. And while there is that regular thing of Saturday Night Live coming in and sitting on the rail at Second City and watching the main stage show, ETC, and that year they went out to Northwest, and the amazing cast at Northwest included Dave Koechner, Todd Stashwick, Nancy Walls, and there was something about the chemistry with that cast that they wanted to see all those people. And eventually out of that crew, both Dave and Nancy made it onto SNL that season. And Todd Stashwick, they were really hot on because he was more of like a sex symbol sort of a guy, which was unique for him, because I think he was, he grew up kind of thinking of himself kind of nerdy, but he was already starting to like blossom into a hunk sort of a guy. And, he's always doing those sexy sort of villains now. But I think they saw that appeal in him. And so they were really courting him a lot for that show too. And he said, you really should take a look at one of the Turcos at Blueco. And in particular, you should look at Bill Chott. And so I spent most of those summers in the Second City in the war room, where it was always air conditioned. And I was hanging out there. I was getting up, and Dave Koechner said, "Hey, there's a message for you in that message box, right?" And I was like, "What?" I never even used the message box. And I was like, "What?" And I looked at it, and it was, I can't remember. Oh God, what casting company was it? Anyway, they were like, hey, they want to see you for the Dana Carvey show, or no, for Saturday Night Live. And so I auditioned for Saturday Night Live and got flown out to New York for that with all those other wonderful folks. And I didn't get it because I did my impression of Jackie Gleason taking a difficult crap. And it was a big hit in the Second City shows, but it tanked in front of Lorne Michaels while I was standing there with a red light on me, and I just froze. And I was doing a song that I had written to close out my act, because I was like, big finish. And then I stumbled on the lyrics, and I paused and said, let me start that again. And, any other audition, they go, okay, great, take 2. But you can't do that on live TV. So I think that was the point at which I lost SNL. But Robert Smigel, who was exec producing the Dana Carvey show about a year later, remembered my audition, thought it would be hilarious to have me do that impression, the impression of Jackie Gleason for Dana Carvey. So I was touring back on the road with Second City, doing an industrial in New York, when they said, hey, they want to see you at ABC in New York. And I was like, I'm doing an industrial in New York. And they said, can you get across town? And I pleaded with Joe Keefe. I said, can I get to ABC to do this? It's basically a callback audition because they already know they wanted to see me. They called for me. And he said, only if you can guarantee, because what we were doing was a live national hookup for this company out of the set of Moesha. Remember the talk show Moesha? We were on her set, filming it live with these cameras, doing the industrial scripts that we had been sold, but it was being broadcast to big meeting rooms all over the country for whatever company it was. It might have been Sears or whatever, big national company. I can't remember anymore what it was for. Because to me, the most important thing that day was getting to ABC 7 in New York and reading. And they asked us to do like 3 characters and 3 impressions, or you could just read through this monologue 3 times as 3 different characters. And instead of doing that, I took the monologue and cut it into like 27 different voices, characters, and accents. And some of them weren't that deep. It was just like, he also does a Russian accent. Good to know. But everyone was distinctly different, a different voice, a different point of view, a different character. And they were a little bit blown away. And then Smigel, then they flew me out again. Yeah, I got flown out. Me, Susan Messing, Scott Robinson, Kate Flannery was already out in LA, I think, at that point, and just a host of other people too. Of course, Stephen Colbert, Steve Carell, who wound up booking it as well. It was great to have been a freshman while they were like the college kids that came back to visit the high school after they graduated. Basically, they were even beyond the people that I considered the seniors, and so Smigel comes up to me, taps me on the knee, goes, "Hey, Bill, could you do me a favor?" I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "Can you do your impression of Jackie Gleason taking a difficult crap?" And I was like, no, that's what tanked my SNL does. I know. I was watching it laughing because A, I thought it was funny, even though Lauren wasn't getting it. And B, I thought it was funny that Lauren hated it. So could you please, Dana will love it if I set it up with that. Can you please do it? And I was like, okay. And that's what got me the job. Because we had another callback. They flew us out to Igby's Comedy Club. And we were all lined up. I was one of the first people to go through the door. Walked out. The casting director from the network at the time came out. She was looking around. She was looking for somebody. I don't know who. But then she caught my eye. And I was like, is she looking for me? And she went like that. And I was like, is that for me? Or was she just saying because she saw me and I had just recently gone? Or I didn't know. But then... we did our first round of auditions, stuck around. I was already a big fan of Bob Odenkirk, and he was kind of auditioning for that show. He had already been on the Ben Stiller show, which I loved. And I think they had already done the first season of Mr. Show. But he was, eyeing out network opportunities. And so, and he's like best friends with Smigel. So I think it was basically if he could get released from his contract at HBO, he could potentially work with his buddy Smigel on this show. And of course, he and Dave Cross came in and did, visit the offices and give some input and stuff like that later on in the day. But I actually read lines for my audition with Bob Odenkirk, who I was thinking at the time, I guess Bob's already got this job. And now he's reading with some of us people who are trying to fight it out for crumbs.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Would you mind sharing that impression of Jackie Gleason taking a difficult crap?
I gotta be honest with you, I'm not prepared, and I missed a whole night's sleep last night. So okay. I'm struggling to give you a coherent interview, and I don't think I would hit the nail on the head if I did that. But if people want to see the documentary about the Dana Carvey show, Too Funny to Fail, they will see my impression of it there.
Wonderful. And because that was actually my next question or comment is about the documentary on Too Funny to Fail, which and thank you for doing this. And as soon as you want to wrap it up, let me know because I don't want to take up the rest of the night.
I've got a childcare swap coming in a little bit. So
okay, you tell me because I can Joe Rogan and we can go 3 hours.
And I would love that. Sometime I would really love to because I've never done a 3-hour interview. I would love to do an interview that lasted that long.
we have there's a lot more to cover as well, but Bill, I want to thank you for the time that you have spent. So you tell me, what time is your heart out, and we'll get you out of here by then. It's 5:00 right now.
It is 5:00, and you just asked a question, so I'm gonna do not the Jackie Gleason question, but I'll answer whatever question you were moving on to. I'll be happy to answer that for you for sure.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, I guess we should continue with the Dana Carvey show, because it was too funny to fail. So what happened, or what's your take on that? If it's something you want to address now, or we can save it for later,
It was difficult because everybody around me when we were shooting it, from the cast to the writers to the producers to the hair and makeup and all, a lot of the hair and makeup and props and all those people worked on Saturday Night Live originally from the original show. And we had the best writing staff ever. And I was on the writing staff and didn't consider myself worthy. So I didn't submit as often or as much as I could have. I was just so stymied by the talent that was in that room. And so I thought it was going to be a longer experience, and it was like 7 episodes. And then there was talk, even when it looked like it was going to be our last episode there at ABC, there was all kinds of talk about, Lauren wants to do this show out of Studio 8H when they're not shooting or rehearsing for SNL. And I was like, really? So I thought this was going to really be a big thing and go on and do anything. And of course, all of us had wonderful things happen after that, especially for, Steve Carell and Stephen Colbert. Heather Morgan and I went on to do wonderful things. The writing staff, went on to become Oscar winners, many of them. And it was an amazing experience. I found out that it was canceled because I picked up a USA Today and read the news. Nobody told me, no agent, no manager, nobody from the show. That was my first taste of show business, and it didn't taste quite as good as I thought it would.
Wow. But then from then on, let's just maybe let people know what other projects you're involved with. And then maybe in part 2, we can actually do a deep dive on, being the voice of the announcer on Ambiguously Gay Duo. And obviously that's because you knew Robert Smigel, and you're wildly talented. And then, Galaxy Quest and The Ringer. And I mean, so if you want to maybe just quickly gloss over for now all these amazing projects that you've been involved in, if you have time, and if not, you can always save it for part 2. But we can
let's definitely do that. Let's definitely do that in a part 2. What I can say is the projects I'm working on right now. There's a movie I did called Mid-Century with Bruce Dern and a lot of other fabulous new actors. And I don't have a release date on that one. I also did a Netflix series, an episode of that called Monster, and it's about Jeffrey Dahmer. That's about to be seen. I'm now recurring on Young Sheldon, which is amazing. They actually took a clip out of my second episode that I did and used it in a new episode, so I didn't even need to work, and I'm recurring, which is good.
Lance Barber's on that show, is he not?
God bless Lance. Yeah, every time I've worked on that show, which has been twice now, and 3 if you count the time that they just clipped and put me in it. I've spent most of the day just talking with Lance, and the second time I did it was during the pandemic. It was right as they were letting studios start to open again, and then they shut down right after that. So all of the precautions were in place, mask and visor, distancing, red zones, all that. And despite the fact that we had to distance, Lance and I spent the day talking down the hall to one another, in person down the hall. He's such a great guy.
Amazing.
And that show was so blessed to have him, and he was blessed to have that show. And one of the nicest guys I know, most down to earth, just an amazing guy. And then the other 2 things that I'm doing educationally with Improv is I'm teaching at the Superhero Intensive that I told you about. People can go to superherotrainingcenter.com. Yvonne Landry has brought in some of the best teachers from all over. Sharna Halperin, who we mentioned earlier, is going to be teaching there. Todd Stashwick, whom we also mentioned earlier, is going to be there. A teacher from the Lecoq Clown School is going to be there. I'm going to be taking that class just to learn more about clown. I'm going to be teaching a class in character and improv. And she's got all these teachers, voice teachers who are like voice coaches to like famous celebrities. Amazing. And then I'm also teaching in Austin and doing a show in Austin, Texas, May 15th. If people want to find out more about that, they can send an email to connect@pubpartyentertainment.com.
Connect at
pubpartyentertainment.com.
Wonderful. Well, I hope you enjoyed taking Lecoq class. No?
I knew it was coming.
Yeah, I know you did. Do something with that. No, I'm just kidding. Bill.
I did. I said coming.
I love it.
Oh, it was good doing a dick joke with you today.
Thank you, Bill.
Can I say that on Fireside?
We'll also have to maybe talk about some of the times we've hung out, some Vegas stories.
Would love that.
Yeah. But it's so wonderful to see you, and you look amazing. Again, I mean, I think it's for your health, and it's amazing what you're doing. I know it's not easy because I would love to find out, and we'll chat later. What you're doing, because I lost something like, I'm still super heavy, but I lost like 65 pounds by doing yoga.
Yeah, I could tell you'd lost a lot.
So I think we're both on that same journey. So thank you. And it's what's that?
I said, keep on losing.
Yeah, keep on losing. Well, Rich Tellerico said that, because his weight has always fluctuated. And when he was on the main stage, there was a joke that was based on his weight. And he said the sweetest thing he ever heard was no laughs when they went after his weight on the stage for this joke. And then it didn't work anymore because he was no longer super heavy. And he said that was kind of the sweetest sound of silence, was not getting any laughs, for that joke, because he'd lost so much weight. But I would love to continue this another day. Please go to the improvtrick.com. If you want to learn from one of the world's best improvisers, this is Mr. Bill Chott, award-winning improv teacher, or follow him, to Austin or to is it Portugal? Was that where the
Portugal,
superheroes?
Figueira de Foz, which is an amazing beachside town where we're doing improv at this resort, and right across the road from it, one of the largest electronic dance music festivals is going on. So it's not just like, first of all, it's an amazing way to study with people from all over the world, to get the skills that people need to get. Because when Yvonne started Superhero Training Center, the idea was, why is it that all these British actors wind up playing American people in American superhero movies? And it's because Shakespeare training, and part of that Shakespeare training includes stage combat. And while Americans do get stage combat, every British actor learns their stage combat. And they learn how to do acting on a grand scale via Shakespeare. They're a little more well-rounded in the circus arts too. And all that Yvonne is providing with this thing for people to come from all over Europe, but also for people from America to go there at the height of the holiday season in Europe, where these amazing festivals and parties are going on. So you could write off the trip and then pop around and enjoy the party across the hall, across the way, and across the rest of Europe, or anywhere, close to the continent, and study and have a vacation, which is an amazing opportunity.
Bill, that's amazing, and you're the perfect person to be teaching there. And it just goes to show you too that as teachers, influencers, whatever you want to call us, we're always learning, because you don't have to go there and take a clown class, but you're doing this, and it's
wanted to all my life.
Amazing. I remember in Austin we studied with Antonio Clemente, was that his name? He's since passed away. I recently looked him up. Oh. And even though it was like a 1-day workshop, it was life-changing as far as, Commedia dell'arte. He was this Italian teacher, Commedia dell'arte. Yes. It was just inspiration. This was 20-some years ago, and I still remember it. And Antonio Mazzone Clemente, I think I should remember his name. And it was just brilliant. So it just goes to show you, we never stop learning, and it's great to be spreading your knowledge, because your course is amazing. The improv trick, right? So
yes. Did I turn off my camera accidentally?
I still see you, so don't
good.
stand up. I'm guessing.
I had a text coming in. My wife is almost getting here with our daughter, so we got to do a handoff in just a second. So I had to take that text. Anyway, thank you so much, Paul, and I really look forward to coming back for a part 2. It's always wonderful talking with you, man.
Bill Chott, thank you. It has been my absolute pleasure. Please, everyone, follow Bill Chott across all social media. And do you have any final thoughts? Any final words? Mr. $1 bill, $20 bill Chott, $100 bill Chott. What should we call it?
$20 bill. I'll keep it at $20 bill. $20 bill, which is Lance came up with that theme song for me, and Lance Barber, whom we were talking about earlier. A last thought: keep on learning, no matter what you're doing, whether it's improv, acting, podcasting, communications, content. People learning more about trading financial instruments and things like that. You can always learn something new, so keep learning.
I think that is wonderful advice. So, folks, please visit theimprovtrick.com to connect with Mr. Bill Chott. I'm at paulvato.com. And thank you guys so much for spending part of your day with us. And if you didn't get here at the beginning, you can always go back and re-listen. So, Bill, I'm going to invite the Waitbot over, and thank you. And thank you guys so much all for being here. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks a lot, Paul.
Ese hombre holding up the bottle. Look a little closer, cigar and Moscato. An actor in improv coming from Chicago. Outdoor, make way for Paul Vato.